In part 1, I confessed to being a faux achiever, described how the mainstream schooling system treats humans like robots, leading to a pervasive disengagement problem, and how that system uses vanity metrics instead of actionable metrics. Now, I'm going to finish introducing you to the learning tree metamodel in order to explain what actionable metrics we need to solve the disengagement problem, and to uncover schools that already have solutions in place. After I've explained the model, then you will also have an answer to the question of why we are building the nurturing capacity of K-12 schools. The human mind, depicted as a tree here with 8 roots of primary human needs, shapes motivation, attitude, and engagement as we move up the trunk of well-being. And thus, we already have the actionable metrics that we need to change how schooling works. My published research on patterns of motivation found that the alternative schools I studied maintained intrinsic motivation in contrast to 30 years of data showing that the intrinsic motivation consistently declines in mainstream public and private schools. Intrinsic motivation is important because it reflects both well-being, and it is the gold standard for the best possible learning outcomes. Moving on up, we get to the branches of activity, meaning all of our conscious thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. The roots and trunk are completely non-conscious processes that determine what we will become conscious of as those processes produce the activities that we enact. After that, we have the leaves, flowers, and fruits of all possible outcomes. Next, we have to understand how individuals interact with the context in which they exist. I don't know if you know about real trees, but it turns out that over 95% of the actual material substance of a tree comes from thin air. The process of photosynthesis in trees takes carbon dioxide from the air, then uses energy from the sun to break off the carbon atom, and uses as a building block for itself, and then exhales the 2 oxygen atoms. In this metaphor, a modicum of individuality, derived from how the individual found access to primary need supports in the current situation, travels up, to combine with a bunch of substance that comes from the organizations and institutions, such as schools or families, and some input from the society, culture, and/or ancestors. Together, those 3 elements produce the structure that gives shape to the tree. The final important step in this model is how over time the leaves, flower, and fruits fall away to become the mulch of the new now. There is some kind of relationship between where the roots find access to need supports and where those resources end up becoming a leaf, a flower, or a fruit. It is an important part of the cycle of feedback that we try to align the outcomes of our activities with the ways we have found access to need-satisfying resources. This relationship between the roots and the leaves, flowers, and fruits has influence on the structure of both our individuality and the composition of the situation. Now, let's revisit the problem of vanity metrics for a moment. Pedagogy is what schools are currently concerned with. Teachers set up classrooms inside a school so that they can engage with students. Together, most teachers and students engage with a set of curriculums and a set of assessments to be able to justify their existence to outsiders. If all there is to pedagogy is the activities, then it makes perfect sense to manage it like a factory full of robots. But also notice that a whole lot of what shapes human behavior, according to science, is not encompassed by the traditional notion of what pedagogy entails. Given this view, we can see that the vanity metrics that drive our system are completely understandable. No one was conspiring to cause disengagement. The vanity metrics are a perfectly logical way of managing a system of activities and outcomes. But when you assume that the surface features of the classroom are all there is to it, then it's not easy to accept the idea that something else is hidden in the situation and causing problems. While the concept of the hidden curriculum has been around for decades, it has not really gotten any traction as a meaningful concept in the management of schools because it was previously too vague to be unuseful. Given the obvious patterns of disengagement and the intractability of the other problems that got all the attention in the media, anyone who would give the system more than a cursory glance would agree that something hidden is going on. But until now, it has not been clear at all what you would need to measure in order to discern whether or not the hidden factors are being managed effectively. The hidden curriculum is where brains and policies interact. Neither brains nor policies can be directly observed in a classroom, but how they interact creates limits on what can happen there. We can't do much about the brains, but we can do a lot about the policies. Now, here's the answer to the question from part 1 of this video. We are driven to build the nurturing capacity of K-12 schools because existing policies, misguided by the delivery model of learning, undermine primary human needs. So, we are developing the first hidden curriculum toolbox, a set of practical tools that will enable schools to manage their hidden curriculum. Now let's put this metamodel in perspective. There are numerous important metamodels that define certain fields. In physics, if you make a claim that contradicts the fundamental forces or one of the laws of thermodynamics, then you're simply not doing physics. In chemistry, the same is true of the periodic table of the elements. In biology, it is the cellular nature of life and the molecular nature of cells. Recently, psychology seems to be arriving at a similar reverence for the dual process nature of the human mind. The learning tree is the first dual process model for education. The model implies that if what you call a pedagogy undermines primary human needs, then you're quite simply doing something other than education. A proper education cannot follow from any process that does not first ensure support for primary human needs. Once primary human needs are addressed, then there are potentially an infinite number of pedagogical choices that you can make. Promising pedagogical models are numerous. Democratic schools, homeschooling, EdVision's charter schools, Montessori, Waldorf, Reggio Emilia, natural learning relationships, big picture schools, high-tech high, micro schools, rights-respecting schools, and probably many, many others. We have a plan for helping all kinds of schools to ensure that their faculty and staff can effectively demonstrate the integrity of their pedagogy by establishing a proper foundation of primary need support. The most pervasive symptom of the disengagement problem is in the name for our plan because the metamodel implies that all the symptoms of this problem will be resolved simultaneously as support for primary human needs becomes a pervasive feature of schooling. These 3 steps in the plan encompass adopting the metamodel at ever larger scales. Educate is about getting the adults in each school to understand and apply the learning tree metamodel. Equip is about ensuring that each school community will have access to a valid and robust system for gathering actionable data. One of the key elements of the equipping process is developing an accreditation model based on well-being. Traditional accreditation is based on a combination of examining academic delivery practices and institutional integrity. Well-being needs to become a crucial part of that process such that schools that do not demonstrate the maintenance of motivation and engagement in their student population should either be denied accreditation or put on probationary status until they can turn that around. Given that declines in motivation and engagement indirectly indicate psychological harm to humans, then this is clearly more important than any given pattern of academic results. Advocate is about shifting the larger policy context for schools at district, state, federal, and international levels to ensure that schools will be able to protect and defend nurturing pedagogical choices from outside interference. Advocate is actually both the end and the beginning of this process because we've already put together a policy resolution that schools will need to adopt in order to set the context in which our work can be effective. At the beginning of part 1, I pointed out how Hollywood teacher as savior movies portray the attitude of the outcasts and delinquents who are supposed to be saved. The learning tree metamodel provides us with a way to predict what it is about teachers and principals that would lead to such extraordinary results. The common denominator of all the teacher as savior movies, and without doubt the common denominator of the realities behind those stories, is essentially support for the primary human needs of the students. Recall that in the learning tree metamodel, the primary needs are the roots of the tree. If you watch those movies carefully, you can see how Hollywood gets it mostly right by focusing on how the teachers have to start by establishing a relationship of mutual respect. After they have established a respectful relationship, then they find ways to support the autonomy of the students and also their sense of competence for handling the tasks that teachers expect them to do. According to this model, better and more consistent support for the primary needs of students will lead to better outcomes regardless of the pedagogical commitments of each school. Right now, all of the academic assessments in use are effectively vanity metrics because of how the lack of support for primary human needs confounds whatever results occur. To illustrate how a confounding factor distorts results, let's say you want to know how fast the wind is blowing. You get out your trusty assessment device, called an anemometer, and take a reading. It says that the wind is blowing at 75 miles per hour to the east. But if you don't take into account the fact that you are also traveling at 70 miles an hour to the west, you'll have a distorted reading of the speed of the wind. We don't really know what is going on in education academically because we have not yet taken into account the confounding of academic results created by the systematic neglect of primary human needs in most schools. The equip step in our plan can begin to correct this situation by developing systems to regularly measure patterns of motivation and engagement in schools. If you agree that building the nurturing capacity of schools is important, then committing your resources to us, whether political, financial, intellectual, or otherwise, may seem risky given that we are a startup. First of all, 8 allies and 2 schools have already taken the biggest risks by being the first 10 members to trust us with financial resources. But we want to further reassure you that we are doing our best to mitigate that risk by building our project on fundamentals that are tried and true. The Metamodel is based on well-established cognitive and behavioral psychological science. Our innovation is only in the way that we organize and present those scientific principles. A membership association, accreditation, and political outreach are time-tested and dependable approaches to creating social benefits on the nonprofit side. And on the for-profit side, professional development, consulting, a train-the-trainer system, and media production are all solid, well-known business models. Our team of professionals are ensuring that we structure the relationship between the entities to avoid conflicts of interest and ensure that resources are used properly. My name is Don Berg. I'm the founder of both Schools of Conscience and Attitutor LLC. I have over 20 years of experience leading children in a variety of settings, outside the traditional classroom, including homeschooling other people's kids. My partner in this project is Melody Dawn. We're both experienced teacherpreneurs, entrepreneurial teachers. Melody taught 2nd grade in public school in Arizona for a couple of years and also ran 2 tutoring companies that served public school students. We are in the process of putting together a great team to take this work forward. If you agree that building the nurturing capacity of K-12 schools is important, you can participate in helping us get the work done. Your endorsement connects us to a school you care about. Lots of endorsements of the Nurturing is the Foundation resolution will encourage school leaders to adopt the policy at their school. Your membership dues enable us to work with schools to enact the policy. Our next membership milestone is 100. So even if you only contribute the minimum each month, it demonstrates to the school leaders that we meet with that there is a growing and committed movement for nurturing education policy. You can help us stay in touch with schools as a liaison. As they learn about the Metamodel and use the policy to protect nurturing behaviors and correct non-nurturing behaviors, you can help us by observing the changes within the school that lead to increases in engagement. You can also help us advocate for nurturing at higher levels. Wider protections and promotion of nurturing beyond schools will lead to more engagement in society. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us through our website at schoolsofconscience.org. Thanks for watching.